This particular video is going to be discussing dinosaurs and how they are not millions and millions of years old as the mainstream academic world would lead you to believe. Some of the information we're going to get into spans into creationist and young Earth, and we'll also tie that in because we have to show you that these fossils that are found on this Earth cannot be that old. So some of the things that we are going to tackle also is the dating. And if you look up where they're doing their dating for the fossils, they point to, we date these fossils according to the rocks that are found on the layer that they are found. And then you look up how do they date, and then you look up how do they date the rocks. Well, they point towards the fossils and say we date the rocks according to the fossils. This is completely idiotic, as any geologist knows that soils are settling, they're moving, shifting, turning upside down. So you cannot go by the layers all the time. Most of the time, it is chaos under the ground, and you could be highly mistaken if you just think that if you dig down, the more you dig, the older it gets. That is completely incorrect. Another thing is that the dinosaur mainstream narrative is pushing evolution, and they also want to disconnect from the Bible. So you won't find any Bible in these academic scientific worlds that are discussing dinosaurs. Most of the archaeologists that are assigned to digging up dinosaurs are evolutionists, and they also do not believe in the Bible. Now, the word dinosaur is a relatively new term. It does not date back very far, and prior to it being known as dinosaurs, they were known as dragons, and sometimes also known as lizards. If you look at cultures around the world, they're all dealing with dragons, people slaying dragons, people having recipes of making soups with dragons and potions with dragon hearts and dragon teeth and ground up dragon bones. There is carvings around the world of dinosaurs that date back thousands and thousands of years. You have to ask yourself, how do these people know what dinosaurs look like? In some cases, they even know what the scales and the skin looks like. What the academic world is actually trying to do is they're trying to replace religion with a new religion, i.e. evolution. You have to have a creation story. You have to have what do you do while you're here, and you have to have an explanation for what happens after we're gone. And evolution says that you evolved from a rock into a soup, into a creature, and that creature has kept evolving on to what we have today. There is no evidence of that, and of course, it is a fairy tale. Another problem with evolution is that it defies scientific laws. There are many scientific laws that stand in the face of evolution. That is a theory, evolution theory. It is still not proven because it cannot be proven. There are too many problems with it. Once you learn enough science, you actually go out of thinking that. Evolution theory is only for the low-level science people and the casual citizen. The people at the top of science academia admit and do not believe that evolution is a real thing. This is why they have to do panspermia and say, well, evolution's not observable on this planet. Perhaps it's visible on a faraway planet, and that we were seated here. So they are still just moving the ball because they have no evidence of evolution ever being a thing. Any mutations to any cells causes cancer and deformities. Mutations never form positive things, only negative things. So where did the dinosaurs come from, and when were they here? So it's interesting that you can find a layer of silt and also some ash layer around the world at the same layer that you find these dinosaur bones. I spoke to an archaeologist one time who does digs on dinosaurs, in which he found some dinosaurs, in which he found a Tyrannosaurus rex. in which he found it by tracing the tracks of the T-Rex. They found the tracks in a low-lying field that a farmer owned, and they continued these tracks, and lo and behold, they found this T-Rex, full skeleton. And of course, he was running uphill. I asked him, is this common? And he said, oh yes, we actually find most of our dinosaurs by looking for high ground. We find them running towards high ground or on high ground, facing their head towards high ground. What could they have been running from? Perhaps a giant flood? Is that why we find shells and sea creatures at the tops of mountains? In the Bible, it describes that when Noah's flood happened, the mountains fell and the valleys rose, and all the things were displaced. I have before you a starfish from Morocco, which was on a basin of silt layer that was the same silt layer for the global flood. This starfish was among thousands of starfish exactly the same. They were buried very, very fast and fossilized. Could this be from Noah's flood? I have here also some fossilized closed clamshells. The thing about a clam is when it dies, it opens up. To get a fossilized closed clamshell, you have to have it buried very, very fast. These clamshells were found on the side of a mountain in Texas. They were also found with that same silt layer that is the silt layer that goes for the flood of the whole planet. The Bible has the answers for this flood that we see around the world. The Bible makes it clear that a giant flood engulfed the planet. Water came from the ground and water came from the sky. They've done ice core samples at the poles, and they have showed that there was indeed a cataclysmic event that changed the pressure and the oxygen levels of this planet. There was a scientist that decided, let me recreate these atmospheric pressures that we found in these ice core samples, in which he grew a tomato tree that was 2 stories high and bare tomatoes the size of basketballs. He also grew some piranhas in a water tank, and they became the size of a Volkswagen. Now we know that God created the heavens and the earth, and then he created animals, and then he created man. The thing about lizards is they continue to grow as long as they live. You can see this with alligators and crocodiles. As long as you keep feeding them and give them a perfect environment, they will continue to grow. They do not stop. And usually they just outgrow their actual food source by getting too big. But if they were to continue to eat, they would keep growing. Can you imagine a lizard that is over 500 years old? Can you imagine how tall that lizard might get? Some might even call that a dinosaur. One of the things they do not share with the public is that 95% of the dinosaurs that they uncover are 3 foot or shorter. That means 5% of them are the big boys. So our image of gigantic dinosaurs all covering the whole entire planet is incorrect. Only 5% were actually big dinosaurs. We might also ask that with 30% more pressure and more oxygen, if a human being was living at that time, wouldn't they be a lot taller? Let's continue on with more evidence showing that dinosaurs cannot be millions of years old. Let's look at what the Bible says. Job 40, verse 15 through 18. And this is Job having a discussion with God in which God is actually talking, telling him things that he cannot respond to, in which it says, look now at the behemoth, In some places, they translate behemoth as a rhino or a elephant or a giraffe. But I'm going to show you how this cannot be. Continuing, which I made along with you. He eats grass like an ox. See now, his strength is in his hips, and his power is in his stomach muscles. He moves his tail like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are tightly knit. His bones are like beams of bronze, his ribs like bars of iron. There is no creature out there that roams the land and eats grass that fits this description other than a dinosaur. Could it be a brontosaurus or a brachiosaurus? And it completely makes sense for God to be pointing this dinosaur out because this is the biggest of his creatures. And he's making a point to Job, the biggest of creatures, consider it. And he goes on in chapter 41 to discuss the Leviathan, which is the biggest of his sea dinosaurs. It was very troubling for the mainstream academic world when soft tissue was found on a dinosaur. Many of the archaeologists all denied it, called it fake. At the time, it was very controversial because it had never been found before. Since then, they find soft tissue all the time. The academic world has just quit denying it and quit calling them fakes, as they find soft tissue and DNA quite often. Some of the artifacts that are in museums that have been buried away, they were never examined for soft tissue. And they're now going back and finding DNA and soft tissue. They have even found skin of dinosaurs. If dinosaurs are 65 million years old or older, how on earth could there still be soft tissue? You can see through these photos on the left, you have some soft tissue strands. You also have in the center, you have red blood cells of dinosaurs. And the picture on the right is actually a triceratops horn. I actually met an archaeologist who has found a triceratops horn. And of course, inside of these horns, they are now finding DNA. It's quite common to find triceratops horns as they break off. And most often, there is DNA at the center of the bone structure. How can DNA survive over 65 million years old? Continuing on, here is soft tissue from a T-Rex on your left. You can see it. It's in between two fragments found in the femur. The center picture is dried femur bone. And on the right side, picture C, is fibrous tissue from a bone. Here is scanning electron microscope images that captured collagen fibers, material from what is supposedly 80 million years old. And one of the early finders of these soft tissue from dinosaurs is Mary Schweitzer from North Carolina State University. And she was scrutinized from her findings. However, now everybody finds this too. There are many fossils out there that can show you that the academic world is incorrect. There is no way that dinosaurs were fossilized over millions of years. There was a cataclysmic event that wiped them all out all at once, very fast, covered them up with silt. The whole world experienced it, in which you can see there are two separate pictures. They almost look the same, but they're not. There are two fish is in the process of eating another fish. And of course, we can see his bones, and we can see he is mid-bite when he is covered up and fossilized. We find things like this all the time. Another thing that indicates rapid burial is dinosaur eggs in nests. Dinosaur eggs have to be covered up very fast to be fossilized. I want to now take a minute to talk about the Taylor tracks. In 1969, Stan Taylor began excavating on the Paluxy River in Glen Rose, Texas, a series of 14 sequential human footprints, 11.5 inches. And these are on the same level, even crossing and entering in 134 three-toed dinosaur tracks. Here you have dinosaur and human footprints at the same time. If dinosaurs are 65 million years old or older, why do we have human footprints alongside of them? Does this mean that humans are 65 to 80 million years old? The evidence doesn't support that. We will get into some of the dating of the planet in a little bit. Let's now talk about other tracks that they have found with dinosaurs and humans together. The Laetoli trails, the Zapta tracks found in Paramim limestone in New Mexico, the Meister print found in Utah, the McFall Trail, the Royal tracks in Texas, and the Turkmenistan tracks. The Turkmenistan tracks and the Kugatan Nature Reserve are 428 three-toed dinosaur tracks, as well as human tracks in the solid bedrock. We find these tracks showing that humans and dinosaurs existed together. This is a problem for evolutionists. This is a problem for the conventional thinking that the Earth is billions of years old and that dinosaurs only existed tens of millions to hundreds of millions years old. Now I want to talk about lycosibs or polystrate trees. There's actually tons of these. There might be some in your state that you can go see, but these are essentially trees that have been thrown up against the mountain and they've been fossilized. We see them inverted and upright. Polystrate fossils run throughout rock layers, proving that the rock layers are not different ages, but must have been laid very quickly before the trees had time to decay. If the whole entire planet is flooded, of course, there's going to be violent trees all shoved to mountainsides, particularly if there's runoff. Here are some more. You can see the roots on the one on the right. Now I want to talk about Dry Falls, Washington. Many people don't know about this particular place, but it is a gigantic waterfall. It's not a waterfall that formed over a long period of time. Dry Falls makes Niagara Falls look like a tiny little lightweight. Here's an overview shot of the waterfall. It is a catastrophic flooding channel, water at 65 miles per hour through the upper Grand Coulee and over this 400-foot rock face. It is estimated that the falls was 5 times the width of Niagara Falls. Cataclysmic scientists have measured the deterioration of this fall, and they say a massive amount of water rushed over this all at once and formed this. The same goes for the Grand Canyon. The mainstream idea of the Grand Canyon is that the Colorado River slowly deteriorated the Grand Canyon, but the evidence just does not support it. What fits with the evidence of the Grand Canyon is there was a giant cataclysmic event with a massive amount of water pouring over it. I now want to briefly talk about fossils. The mainstream world has a misconception of what fossils is and how fossils form. There has to be the right kind of soil, the right layering, and also the mineral composition. This is very important as you might bury things and they will not turn into fossils. But if you have the right minerals, you can almost fossil anything. Here are some examples where you've mineralized 2 old-fashioned home phones. The picture in the middle is actually a solid fossil of a teddy bear. This was made next to a mineral-rich waterfall. Same goes for this hat on the right. Would you argue that any of these 3 objects are 65 million years old? Now I want to go on to show you some human objects that were found deep, deep in the earth. The picture on the left is a small metal cup, probably made for smelting as the shape. And it was found deep in some coal. For some coal miners were digging at extremely low level depths and they came across this man-made object. The picture in the center was also found in coal, and it is a small bell. And the picture on the right is a axe with an axe handle. This was found also deep, a coal mining operation, but it was found pieced onto a slab of rock. How can these objects be so far underground? Did the dinosaurs make them? I would argue that these are pre-flood objects. Now I want to leave you with some information on the dating problems of the planet. I want to start by saying that when God created Adam and Eve, he did not create them from newborns. He made them mature. And this is the case for the planet. And also the first round of dinosaurs. So like I said before, the way they date things, the initial way that they date the fossils and the rocks, they both point at each other. So if they're both pointing at each other, then they are free to make up the dating as they like. Let's talk about radiometric dating. It is impossible to prove it to be correct. Lava flows that were 100 years old were tested, and they were shown to be billions of years old. Radioactive decay. When uranium isotopes age, they form helium. Helium release rate for granite rocks around the world was tested by Dr. Russell Humphrey and a group of scientists. And all their findings show that the age of the rocks to be not older than 6,000 years old. This was because there still is so much helium left. If they were just 1 million years old, the granite rocks would have no helium left. And of course, they find helium in abundance. Let's talk about magnetic field of the planet. The Earth's magnetic field is getting weaker at a rate that is calculable. The numbers show that it is 6,000 years old. You can also go by the spin of the Earth. The Earth spins slowly at a certain rate. This rate can be calculated to the beginning, and the numbers show that it is 6,000 years old. The rate is slowing by 0.005 seconds per year. Every year and a half, they add a second to the clock, called the leap second. You can also go by delta output from rivers like the Nile or the Mississippi. And what you find is they are not that old. The evidence is quite clear that the earth is not old. It was made mature. And that dinosaurs are not millions of years old. We find the dinosaurs buried in the silt layer because they were wiped out in the flood. So things are not what they are being sold to us as. The information shows that the Bible is true and correct. I hope these teachings have been a blessing to you. I hope they have helped you understand that dinosaurs are not millions of years old. The archaeologists are hiding information from the public on the soft tissue and DNA that they are finding constantly. And this presentation is just a small gathering of information. There's actually a lot more information on this subject. I encourage everybody to do your own research and help me pass on the truth. Be sure to like, subscribe, and add a comment. And always, God bless.